The chandeliers inside the Dela Cruz estate's grand ballroom glittered like galaxies trapped in crystal. Every seat was filled, judges, senators, old money from both coasts, and tech giants flown in on private jets. 1,000 eyes watched the altar, but the bride was missing. José de la Cruz stood under a golden arch of white roses, expression unreadable. The string quartet faltered, notes dying mid-bow. Murmurs turned into whispers. Then the whispers turned into gasps. Jessica Varela, his fiancée, had disappeared. His mother's diamond-clad hand trembled as she reached for her rosary. His father, Senator Arturo de la Cruz, clenched his jaw hard enough to shatter bone. Photographers began to lower their cameras. A few of the more aggressive ones zoomed in. The scandal of the century was blooming in real time. José glanced at his watch. 4:17 p.m. 10 minutes late. A man like José never waited. But today, he did. Until a message buzzed in his pocket. He took it out, calmly. Read it once. Then again. I'm sorry. I can't go through with this. I found something real with Bernard. I hope someday you'll understand. He pocketed the phone. Slowly. Deliberately. The whispers crescendoed. Somewhere in the crowd, someone choked on champagne. Jessica Varela, the daughter of billionaire developer Emmanuel Varela, had just walked out of the most powerful wedding merger New York society had seen in decades. Bernard Alvarez, her supposed something real, wasn't even present. The media would feast on this for months. Varela stock would plummet by morning. José stepped forward. He raised one hand toward the officiant. The stunned man fell silent. José took the microphone, his voice steady and calm, like a surgeon before a cut. Ladies and gentlemen, he said. There has been a change. A collective inhale. In light of Ms. Varela's sudden absence, I have decided to proceed with the ceremony. His mother visibly paled. His father's hand twitched at his side. José's eyes swept the stunned congregation, landing on a figure standing frozen at the edge of the bridal party. Ayanna Varela. Jessica's younger sister. She looked like a shadow someone had forgotten to switch off. Blush chiffon gown. Bouquet crushed in her grip. Eyes wide, lips parted, like someone caught halfway between a breath and a scream. José locked eyes with her. Miss Ayanna Varela, he said, voice echoing through the hushed ballroom, will you marry me? 1,000 jaws dropped. The room turned to Ayanna in unison. Camera flashes erupted like gunfire. Ayanna's hand flew to her mouth. Her legs buckled. She had never stood in the spotlight before, Jessica always stood there. Ayanna had always been background noise. Her eyes searched José's face, desperate for explanation. He offered none. Only a gaze so focused it burned through her nerves. He wasn't asking. He was declaring. Ayanna looked at her parents. Emmanuel was ghost white. Her mother clutched her arm like a vice. Don't you dare, she hissed. Ayanna looked back at José. And then, somewhere between the panic and the shame and the fear, she saw something else. A door. A chance. A way out of being Jessica's echo. I will, she whispered. José extended his hand. She took it. And the world watched as the bride changed, the scandal morphed, and history rewrote itself in real time. The de la Cruz wedding continued. But not with Jessica. José de la Cruz had been born into legacy, not luxury. Luxury came later, after the grind, after watching his father transform de la Cruz Holdings from a regional real estate firm into a global power brand. But legacy? That was written in his blood. He was raised not to enjoy it, but to protect it. From the time he could read, he had been fed annual reports instead of fairy tales, shadowed boardrooms instead of playgrounds. He didn't believe in love. He believed in utility, leverage, and outcomes. So when his father said, "You're 32. It's time," José didn't argue. The question was not if he'd marry, but who would make sense. After a half-dozen meetings with heiresses, CEOs' daughters, and polished lobbyists, Jessica Varela emerged as the optimal choice. Elegant, media-savvy, and the daughter of Emmanuel Varela, owner of one of the last privately held development empires in Manhattan. Their union would merge portfolios, crush opposition, and reassure aging stakeholders that the next generation of Dela Cruz leadership was not just competent, but invincible. Jose didn't love her, but he had appreciated her usefulness. Until she left him standing at the altar. He had looked at the smoking ruin of his family's reputation, then across the aisle at Ayanna. And calculated. Even now, days after the shock wedding, Jose remained emotionally steady. If anything, he was sharper. More lucid. Public reaction had been split, half scandal, half awe. While tabloids screamed runaway bride and backup wife, financial analysts had quietly begun to notice Ayanna. Her past was quiet. Her record clean. No scandals. No impulsive PR disasters. No Bernard Alvarez types hanging off her arm. That was valuable. He watched her now from across the library of the Dela Cruz estate, where she sat curled on a window seat, clutching a finance book. Her soft brown hair fell in waves across one shoulder. She was so different from Jessica. No arrogance. No venom behind the smile. Just stillness. She didn't know he was watching. Ayanna had always been invisible. Jessica had made sure of it. Every childhood birthday, every society brunch, every holiday dinner, Ayanna stood just to the left of the frame. Too polite to interrupt. Too nervous to speak up. He remembered one Thanksgiving when Ayanna, 12 at the time, had tried to show him a drawing she made of the Dela Cruz estate. Jessica had yanked it from her hands and said, "Don't waste his time with your scribbles." Jose hadn't even looked up from his tablet. He didn't remember Ayanna crying. He remembered her tucking the sketchbook under her arm and walking away without a word. She never tried to speak to him again. Now she was his wife. He hadn't planned for this. But he didn't regret it. Because Ayanna, for all her timidity, had something Jessica lacked, humility. He'd seen it on their wedding night, when she'd sat on the edge of the bed, still in her gown, eyes red but quiet. "I'm sorry," she had whispered. "I know you didn't want this. You just didn't have a choice." Jose had replied with a firm, neutral tone. "I always have a choice." And he had chosen her. Because she was the only person in that ballroom who hadn't looked at him like a tragic headline. Ayanna didn't know it, but she'd been preparing for this role in secret. While Jessica paraded around society circles, Ayanna had earned a degree in business administration, online, anonymously. She spent nights watching financial strategy lectures while her sister posted vacation selfies from Mykonos. She studied market trends. Read every Dela Cruz quarterly report. She could recite Jose's 2018 keynote speech to the Chamber of Commerce word for word. She had admired him. And she had never expected anything in return. That was why her answer, "I will," had come from both terror and truth. She knew this wasn't love. It was legacy. Still, she wore the ring with both pride and panic. The first breakfast they shared as husband and wife was awkward. Jose read the Financial Times. Ayanna stirred her tea twice too long. The silence stretched. He spoke first. "I assume you've read our prenup." She nodded quickly. "Yes. I signed it." "You also received the amendment." Another nod. "The shares are already in your name." She blinked. "Why?" He folded the newspaper. "Because perception matters. If we're to maintain credibility, the power dynamic has to appear balanced. You can't look like a hostage." She flinched. "I'm not." "You were," he said calmly. "At that altar. Now you're not." She lowered her gaze. "I didn't ask for this." "I know. That's why you're the only person I trust to handle it." The compliment shocked her. She said nothing. But in her chest, something warmed. Jose didn't realize it, but that moment planted a seed. A slow-growing defiance. Because Ayana had been the family's shame. A product of her father's affair, tolerated but never loved. Jessica had always reminded her of that. The staff did too, saying things like "Don't embarrass your sister or you're lucky they let you stay." Now she was a Dela Cruz. Now she held the Varela shares. She wore the 10-carat ring. And Jose? Jose was slowly noticing her. He noticed how she took notes during meetings, how she reviewed contracts he left on the kitchen counter. How she corrected a junior analyst's data set without being asked, and was right. She was growing. So was his curiosity. That night, after another dinner eaten mostly in silence, he asked, "Why did you say yes?" She looked at him across the table. "Because I saw what Jessica was throwing away." He tilted his head. And I knew, if I let her do it, without stepping in, I'd never forgive myself. A pause. "You stepped in to save her?" "I stepped in to save myself," she said. For once. Jose didn't smile. But he felt something twist in his chest. She wasn't fragile. She was emerging. And he was beginning to understand that Ayana Varela was not a substitute bride. She was something else entirely. The truth about Jessica's disappearance broke like a thunderclap across every major media outlet within 48 hours. She hadn't just run away. She had escaped, with precision. She was photographed boarding a private jet at Teterboro Airport with Bernard Valerio, the notorious tech playboy and CEO of Echelon X. Known for his designer sunglasses and a grin that never reached his eyes, Bernard was more than just a disruption in Jose's professional life. He was an unrelenting parasite, poaching junior execs, mimicking Dela Cruz innovations, and undercutting contracts with zero remorse. And now, he had stolen Jose's bride. The headlines screamed. "Billionaire heiress elopes with rival tech mogul. Is this war between empires?" Jessica Varela liquidates $17 million in family assets before vanishing with Bernard Valerio. Backup bride, who is Ayana Varela, and why did Jose marry her instead? Inside the Dela Cruz estate, silence roared like a storm waiting to break. Jose sat in his private study, Ayana standing near the door, as footage played on the monitor, Jessica stepping into Bernard's arms, her designer heels tapping the tarmac, her smile radiant, her betrayal absolute. Ayana didn't speak. She couldn't. Jessica hadn't just ruined a wedding. She had intentionally destabilized the largest merger the city had seen in a decade. A Dela Cruz Varela consolidation meant real estate, energy, tech infrastructure, complete vertical control from the ground up. But Jessica had withdrawn all her Varela shares. Liquidated her trust. Walked away with money that was supposed to seed the merger. And poured it into Echelon X. Bernard's smirk in the photos wasn't personal. It was tactical. Ayana finally whispered, "She planned this." Jose's voice was flat. "Of course she did." She looked at him. "Did you know?" "No." "Do you believe I knew?" He finally turned, looking at her fully. "No." His answer was instant. No suspicion. No edge. Just a clean verdict. It startled her more than if he had yelled. They married that afternoon. No press. No fanfare. A courthouse in Manhattan. Her dress was off the rack. His suit was pressed but not new. The license was filed. The signatures legal. Dela Cruz Varela was saved on paper. But the world wasn't buying it. By morning, the tabloids had renamed Ayana the second-choice wife. Commentators debated whether Jose had snapped. Photos of Ayana looking startled beside him at the altar became memes. When you're the understudy and the lead breaks her leg. Corporate Cinderella with a prenup. Jose ignored it. He had analysts to calm, shareholders to silence, a boardroom to reinforce. Ayana, however, was everywhere, without trying to be. Reporters stalked her building. Paparazzi camped outside the Dela Cruz gates. Old clips of her walking behind Jessica at charity events were resurfaced. Everyone dissected her body language. Her silence. Her worth. Her social media, once a quiet mix of book quotes and black and white photography, was combed for scandal. There was none. Only obscurity. And that made them mock her more. They needed a story. A narrative. So they painted her as the silent substitute with no spine. At first, she tried to ignore it. Until her father, stone-faced from embarrassment, called and told her not to come home for dinner. "You're making things worse," he said. "Lay low." Her mother sent her a text. "You were always meant to be background. Don't confuse pity for destiny." That night, Ayanna stood at the edge of the guest room balcony, her robe tied too tight, the cold spring wind biting her skin. Jose appeared beside her with 2 glasses. He handed her one. "What is it?" she asked. "Apple juice," he said. "Your assistant said you don't like to drink." She blinked. "You asked?" "I listen." She sipped. He spoke. "Your sister's betrayal wasn't emotional. It was a strategic attack." "I know. She didn't just leave me. She tried to bankrupt 2 dynasties." Ayanna turned toward him. "Do you regret marrying me?" Jose met her eyes. "No." Her heart stuttered. "Then, why are you so cold?" He looked away. "I can't offer what I don't have," he said. "I was raised to build legacies, not relationships." "You want warmth." "I want stability." She nodded slowly. "Then let's be honest about it." "We already are." The next day, he transferred a penthouse to her name. Gave her an MX Centurion card. A wardrobe allowance. A driver. A personal assistant. He didn't touch her. He didn't kiss her. But he gave her power. It was an unspoken contract. He would protect her image if she played the perfect wife. So she did. Ayanna walked beside him at press events, her posture elegant, her lips sealed. She learned how to read investor cues, how to hold eye contact with rival CEOs, how to speak with just enough force that people looked twice. She smiled when he needed her to. She posed for Forbes when instructed. But at night, she lay in a bed 2 rooms away from his. Cold. Alone. And slowly, quietly, burning. Because no matter how graceful she was in public, she knew what they said in private. She's just filling the dress Jessica left behind. She's a placeholder. A pretty nothing. Ayanna read every headline. Saved every photo. Studied every smear. She wasn't planning to be their punchline forever. Jose didn't notice the shift at first. How she started staying late in meetings. How she shadowed his senior strategist, asked questions, took notes on legal structures and stock dilution. But she noticed him. Noticed how his eyes darkened when Bernard's name came up on market reports. Noticed how his hands clenched when her sister's face showed up on magazine covers with a fake engagement ring and promises of Echelon X changing the world. Ayanna didn't ask questions. She made plans. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was becoming something more dangerous. A silent player. And Jessica had no idea. Ayanna woke each day in a bedroom that didn't feel like hers. The sheets were too smooth, the silence too deliberate. The Dela Cruz penthouse was perched high above the city like a glass crown, elegant, expensive, and cold. She moved through it quietly, unnoticed, like a shadow in a museum. Her footsteps were muffled by Persian rugs, her presence dulled by the echo of silence between her and Jose. They didn't fight. But they didn't speak much either. Every morning, the housekeeper brought her breakfast. Every evening, the driver waited outside her corporate language class. A stylist came once a week to refresh her wardrobe. Her personal assistant updated her on events she was expected to attend. Photo shoots. Interviews. Silent appearances. Ayanna smiled for the camera. Always. and then retreated into corners where no one looked for her. Jose didn't ask about her classes. He didn't ask what she was reading. He barely looked up when she entered a room. He treated her like part of the PR architecture, useful, composed, silent. And she was trying. So hard. She kept her hair neat, her voice calm, her gaze steady. She learned how to cross her legs elegantly on stage. How to stand a step behind him during press statements. How to wear the right earrings to offset his charcoal suits. But it wasn't enough. Because every week, a new tabloid cover surfaced: Jessica and Bernard in Florence, in Monaco, on a yacht in the Aegean. Matching sunglasses. Designer clothes. Champagne and sunsets. Echelon exquisite couple, they were called. Powerful. In love. Untouchable. Ayanna stared at those images late at night on her tablet, her face dimly lit by screen light, her throat tight. The woman who had left her family bleeding was now being called revolutionary. And Ayanna? She was Mrs. Backup. One night, during a Dela Cruz board meeting, she sat quietly at the long obsidian table as analysts debated revenue forecasts. She wasn't expected to speak. Her name wasn't on the agenda. But she had read every document in the prep packet. Twice. Jose sat at the head, stoic, listening. The CFO misquoted a quarterly projection. Nobody noticed. But Ayanna raised a hand. "Excuse me," she said. "That number's based on last year's market baseline, not the updated model from March." The room went quiet. All heads turned toward her, some surprised, others bemused. The CFO frowned. "I believe it's accurate." "It's not," she replied calmly. "Your own appendix contradicts it. Page 16, footnote 3. Jose turned slowly. His eyes landed on her. Sharp. Intrigued. The CFO blinked, flipped the page. She was right. The conversation continued, but differently. After the meeting, as the room cleared, Jose paused at the door. "You were prepared," he said. Ayanna looked up. "You expect me not to be?" He didn't smile. But he nodded. And walked away. It was the first time in weeks he'd looked at her like she was real. She clung to that moment. In the days that followed, she stayed later. Sat in on 2 more meetings. Took notes. Asked questions, not for praise, but because she wanted to understand. Slowly, the executives stopped ignoring her. They started waiting to hear what she'd say. Some resented her. Others were careful. They'd misjudged her. Jose noticed. But he said nothing. Until one evening, when she returned from a 2-hour financial strategy session with the M&A team. Her head was pounding. Her feet ached. She kicked off her heels and stepped into the kitchen. Jose was already there, his sleeves rolled, tie undone. He was drinking coffee at midnight. "You're late," he said. "Work," she murmured, opening the fridge. "Why?" She turned. "Because I want to know what I signed up for." He tilted his head. "Are you trying to impress me?" "No," she said. "I'm trying to matter." The silence hung. Then he said quietly, "You already do." Ayanna didn't respond. She left the kitchen with her tea, her pulse hammering in her ears. But the next day, she found a leather-bound notebook on her desk. Inside were company org charts, handwritten strategy diagrams, and a note in Jose's handwriting. "You'll need this when you speak during Q3 planning." He hadn't signed it. But she knew it was his. Something changed after that. Not warmth. Not affection. But something. Jose began to stand beside her at events, not in front of her. He began inviting her into meetings instead of allowing her to sit in the back. He gave her space to speak, listened when she did, and never once corrected her publicly. It wasn't love. But it was something like respect. And that, for Ayanna, was everything. Still, when she returned to her room at night, she sometimes cried. Because respect wasn't the same as love. She still remembered the way he used to look at Jessica. How his voice had deepened when he greeted her. How his hand would rest on the small of her back, how he laughed, genuine, open, unguarded. He had never laughed like that with Ayana. She had a crush on him. Maybe more. But he never let her in. One night, while preparing for a joint appearance, their stylists had them fitted for a magazine shoot. Jose wore a classic black tux. Ayana, a sapphire off-shoulder gown. The photographer directed them to stand closer. Pretend you're in love, he joked. Ayana felt Jose's hand graze her waist. Her skin burned under his touch. But his face stayed neutral. As the shutter clicked, Ayana forced herself to smile. Later, as they drove home in silence, she asked, "Do you ever miss her?" His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." She stared out the window. "That's not an answer." "I miss who I thought she was," he said quietly. "I don't miss the weapon she became." Ayana's voice was smaller now. "And me? You're not her." "That's not an answer either." Jose pulled into the private garage. Turned off the engine. He looked at her. "I don't know what you want from me." "I want to stop feeling like a replacement." He didn't speak. And that silence was answer enough. She got out of the car without another word. Back in her room, Ayana stared at the ceiling. She had power now. Influence. Legitimacy. But none of it filled the empty part of her heart that still wondered what it would feel like to be chosen without strategy. To be loved without calculation. She pressed a pillow against her chest and muffled the tears. Tomorrow, she would wake early. She would study harder. She would stand straighter. Because love wasn't promised. But respect? That was something she could fight for. It started with a file, one Ayana wasn't supposed to see. Late one evening, she passed by the Delacruz Situation Room on her way to return a briefing binder. The glass walls were darkened, but inside, a projection flickered. Jose wasn't there. Mark, his senior analyst, had left a data sheet open on the table, misfiled in a folder marked Preliminary Divestitures. Ayana glanced at it. Paused. Then stepped in. The header read. Marcus Group Holdings, Discrete Capital Flow Bernard Valerio / Echelon X. She frowned. Scrolled through the attached graphs. There, buried deep in the ledger trail, were overseas payments wired through shell accounts to Jessica Varela. She froze. Jessica hadn't just left. She had been funded. Ayana stood in silence as cold understanding settled in her bones. The betrayal was never personal. It was war. By the time Jose returned, she was already printing the files. He stepped inside, removing his cufflinks. "What are you doing in here?" She turned the screen toward him, wordlessly. His eyes narrowed. Ayana didn't speak until the silence became pressure. Marcus Group has been quietly investing in Echelon X, she said. Not directly, through intermediaries, shelf funds, and convertible debt. Jose's jaw tensed. That's impossible. Marcus Thorne knows I'd never partner with him. He's not partnering, Ayana said. He's attacking. She handed him the printed file. They're using Jessica and Bernard to create internal volatility, unsettle investors, weaken market trust in Delacruz Holdings, and tank the Varela Delacruz consolidation from within. Jose flipped through the documents with mechanical precision. His silence stretched. There's more, Ayana added. Jessica didn't just liquidate her trust for Bernard. She signed over full proxy control of her remaining Varela shares, to him. Jose finally looked up. His voice was cold steel. How did you get this? I've been tracking it, she said quietly. Since the day the wedding fell apart. His stare hardened. You knew? I suspected. Bernard had ties to Marcus Group years ago, consulting contracts that were suddenly buried. Jessica's patterns matched Marcus's timing, locations, appearances, filings. So I followed them. Why didn't you say anything? Because you didn't trust me, Iona said evenly. And I didn't need you to, yet. Jose set the paper down slowly. I thought you were softer than this. I thought you were smarter, she replied. But we were both wrong. The edge in her voice didn't crack. Jose blinked. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Not a warm smile. But a slow, dangerous one. You've been watching them. I've been watching everyone, Iona said. That night, they didn't go to sleep. They strategized. 4 hours. Iona showed him the call logs. Screenshots. Financial footprints. A copy of a recorded conversation between Jessica and Bernard from a luxury suite in Prague. Once we have enough voting power, we'll force her father out, Bernard had said. And Iona? Jessica had asked. She's irrelevant, Bernard replied. Nobody takes her seriously. Iona had played the recording 3 times. The third time, she didn't even flinch. They think I'm a placeholder, she said. They're about to learn you're a weapon, Jose answered. 3 days later, Iona quietly bought a 7% stake in her father's company using an anonymous holding group, enough to secure a board seat. She claimed it during a quarterly meeting, stunning her father into silence. Jose played his part from the shadows. While Bernard and Jessica celebrated their pending acquisition with PR stunts and champagne, Jose fed tailored leaks through whisper channels, suggesting instability in Varela Holdings. The stock dipped just enough to trigger insider concern. Jessica didn't notice. Bernard did. But assumed it was market noise. It wasn't. Iona sent out feelers to long silent allies on her father's board. Quiet calls. Private dinners. A calm reminder that their future didn't rest with Jessica's recklessness, or Bernard's arrogance. Then the trap was set. Jessica and Bernard launched their takeover attempt at the next Varela shareholder vote. Backed by Marcus Group Capital, they came prepared, press releases drafted, lawyers on standby, the media tipped off to expect a changing of the guard. But when they arrived at the penthouse boardroom, it was Iona who greeted them. Not in a bridesmaid dress. Not in a tailored PR-approved skirt suit. But in slate gray power wear, hair slicked back, eyes focused. Her voice was a scalpel. You're late, she said. Jessica blinked. What are you doing here? Taking what you thought you could steal, Iona replied. Sit down. Bernard laughed. You don't have enough leverage to speak in this room, sweetheart. Iona slid a folder across the table. Inside, full documentation of Jessica's share proxy transfers. A counter-motion. A recorded confession. Legal statements. Board proxies. And 2 resignation letters, quietly signed by key directors during Iona's last 48 hours of calls. Bernard's smirk faded. Jessica paled. You can't do this. Iona smiled. I already did. Jose stepped in behind her, expression unreadable. You made one mistake, he said calmly. You underestimated Iona. We all did. Bernard turned to Jose. You think you've won? This was just phase 1. No, Jose said. This was checkmate. Security stepped in. Bernard and Jessica were escorted out, cameras flashing in the hallway as the media realized something monumental had just flipped. By morning, headlines read. Iona Dela Cruz blocks hostile takeover, emerges as powerhouse CEO in waiting. Jessica Varela outmaneuvered by her own sister in corporate coup. Marcus Group stock dipped 6% overnight. Dela Cruz holdings surged 11%. Iona sat alone that night in the Dela Cruz estate's inner lounge, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. Jose entered quietly, holding 2 glasses. Apple juice? He asked. She nodded. He sat beside her, unusually quiet. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For not seeing you clearly, he replied. For underestimating what you were becoming. She didn't speak. He looked down at his glass. Jessica may have started a war. But you ended it. Ayana turned to him. And what happens now? He met her gaze. Now, he said. Now they stop calling you my backup bride. And start calling me what? He raised his glass. My equal. It was 3:12 a.m. when Jose's phone lit up. Unknown number. No caller ID. But he answered anyway. A trembling voice broke through the static. Jose, it's me. Jessica. Her breath hitched, choked by something raw and unfamiliar, panic. I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call. He's gone. Bernard. He took everything. Jose sat up slowly. His chest tightened, not with anger, but with calculated calm. Where are you? Mount Sinai. Maternity ward. I'm in labor. I have no money. My cards are blocked. Please help me. He didn't answer. Just ended the call. Ayana stirred in the bed beside him. Her hair was loose, cheek pressed to the pillow. Peaceful. She opened one eye. Who was it? He met her gaze. Your sister. Ayana sat up slowly. And? She's at the hospital. Bernard's gone. So is the money. She's asking for help. Ayana said nothing. Just stared at him. Waiting. I'm going, he said. Her face didn't move. But something dimmed in her eyes. Jose stood. Pulled on a jacket. Get dressed, he said. You're coming with me. Not to the hospital. To Varela HQ. Because this wasn't a rescue. It was the final move. The boardroom at Varela Holdings had never hosted a live broadcast before. But Jose had arranged it overnight. Cameras. Microphones. A direct feed to media outlets, shareholders, and competitors across 3 continents. Ayana stood at the head of the table. Calm. Composed. Her navy power suit cut perfectly to frame her now unapologetic stance. Her hair was pinned back in a sleek twist. She looked like Jessica never had, intentional. Unshakable. Jose stood beside her. Not in front of her. Not over her. Beside. The screen behind them flickered on. Jessica, on a grainy hospital camera feed, appeared slumped on a hallway bench. Hospital gown loose around her belly. Hair damp with sweat. She looked older, paler, stripped of her curated perfection. Ayana didn't flinch. She stepped forward. The cameras followed. Jessica Varela, she said, voice steady. You once called me a shadow. Now the light is on you. Jessica blinked. Ayana? What is this? This is the boardroom you tried to destroy. The company you tried to hijack. The family you betrayed. Jessica's voice cracked. I didn't know Bernard was lying. He told me. Ayana cut her off. That you'd be rich. Powerful. Loved. Jessica's lips trembled. Ayana clicked a remote. The screen behind her changed, documents, spreadsheets, wire transfers. She narrated. These are offshore accounts registered to Bernard under shell corporations funded by Marcus Group Capital. This is your signature giving him full proxy control of your shares. These are the liquidation notices from your trust. This is the audio file where you plotted the downfall of both the Dela Cruz and Varela empires. Jessica gasped. That's illegal. Ayana stared at her. So was everything you did. Jose stepped forward. The day you left, you didn't just abandon a wedding. You launched a hostile corporate strike. You were a weapon. You just didn't know you were disposable too. Jessica shook her head violently. I was pregnant, Jose. I believed him. I loved him. And he left you to bleed in a hallway, Ayana said coldly. Just like you left me to live in your shadow. The room fell silent. Then, from the other screen, another feed appeared, Robert Varela, their father, watching from his remote villa. His voice was thin, aged. Jessica. I warned you. Jessica froze. Dad, please. No, his voice cut like a blade. You are no longer my heir. She collapsed in sobs on the hospital bench. Robert turned to the camera. I hereby declare Ayana Varela as the new CEO of Varela Holdings. Effective immediately. Ayana didn't blink. She accepted the title with silence. Jose watched her, not with pride. Not with shock. But with awe. Because this had been her plan. Ayana stepped down from the table. Her voice softened, but only slightly. You think this was about jealousy? She asked Jessica. You were never my competition. You were a distraction. Jessica whimpered. Ayana. I'm your sister. No, Ayana said, eyes narrowing. You're the reason I had to become what I am. Jessica reached toward the camera, hand trembling. Don't leave me like this. Ayana looked to Jose. End the feed. He pressed the button. The screen went black. Silence filled the boardroom. Then Jose turned to Ayana. Slowly. You planned this, he said. She nodded. Since the day she walked out. You played everyone. No, she said. I positioned myself. And waited. He stared at her, stunned. You didn't just save the company. She met his gaze. I saved you. His breath caught. And for the first time in all their months together, he realized he had never truly seen her. Not until now. Ayana stepped forward. Her voice quiet. You built empires. But I built the firewall. Jose whispered, I thought I was marrying the quiet sister. You were, she said. Until you needed a warrior. He exhaled. And now? Ayana looked at him. Now you have a partner. Jose took her hand. Slowly. With intention. The boardroom doors swung open. Applause erupted from the outer halls, analysts, employees, legal teams. Ayana had done what no one else could, protected the future. But only he knew the truth. She had protected him. From loss. From pride. From ruin. Jose leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't deserve you. Ayana smiled, sharp and soft at once. But you see me now. He nodded. I do. And finally, after months of coldness, silence, walls, he pulled her close and kissed her. Not for appearances. Not for strategy. But because the war was over. And she had won it. 6 weeks after the live broadcast that shattered the city's gossip cycle and ended Jessica Varela's dynasty in disgrace, Ayana stood in front of the mirrored walls of her new office, 38 floors above Manhattan's east skyline, the city below stretching out like an empire laid bare. She wore a black double-breasted power suit. Diamond stud earrings. No makeup beyond matte lipstick and conviction. The plaque on her desk read. CEO, Varela Holdings. Across the glass table sat the board of directors, older, seasoned, some of them skeptical, but none of them brave enough to underestimate her now. Her promotion had been unanimous. No one wanted another Jessica. No one could deny Ayana had saved them from collapse. She'd already made changes. Cancelled wasteful vendor contracts. Consolidated regional offices. Rebuilt the legal team. Executed 3 strategic partnerships that turned investor sentiment around in less than a month. Varela Holdings, once considered dead in the water, was reborn. And the Dela Cruz Garcia alliance? Stronger than ever. Jose walked into her office without knocking. He did that now. Not because he was entitled to, because she allowed him to. She didn't even look up from her calendar as he sat across from her. "You cancelled the Tuscany expansion," he said. She nodded. "It was vanity. No ROI. I'd rather focus on Southeast Asia." He studied her. "You've changed." She closed her tablet, finally meeting his eyes. "I had to." Jose leaned back in his chair. "I was wrong about you." Ayana's voice was cool. Everyone was. He folded his hands. "You still wear the ring." She looked down at her left hand, Delacruz titanium band with the 10-carat diamond that once belonged to Jessica. "I earned it," she said. "You did." His voice softened. "But it was given under false terms." Ayana tilted her head. "Are you here to renegotiate?" "No," he said. "I'm here to propose." Again. She blinked. Slowly. "Excuse me?" Jose stood, reached into his coat, and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was a new ring, sleek, elegant, a marquise-cut sapphire flanked by 2 white diamonds. "Before, I asked you to save our reputations." "And you did," he said. "But now, I want to ask you to marry me again. Not for the company. Not for strategy. Not for power." He stepped forward. "For love. Mine." Ayana stared at the ring. Then up at him. "You said you don't believe in love," she said quietly. "I didn't. Until you proved it could look like loyalty. Like protection. Like building together. Like storming boardrooms and sleeping in separate beds, and still staying." He knelt. "Marry me again, Ayana. This time, not as a partner. As my wife. My equal. My heart." She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She held out her hand. He slipped the ring on. It fit. Like it had always been waiting. Their second wedding wasn't a courthouse compromise. It was a celebration. Media from across the globe attended. The Delacruz estate was draped in white orchids and midnight silk. Ayana walked down the aisle in a structured gown made for power, not passivity. Jose met her under the arch, not with rehearsed vows, but with unfiltered eyes. "You saved my name," he whispered. "You gave me one," she replied. Forbes featured them under the headline, "The Empire Reborn, Jose and Ayana Delacruz, the couple who outplayed Wall Street." Fortune magazine, "The quiet bride who became the queen of the boardroom." Every room they entered was silenced by their presence. Ayana, once forgotten, was now the standard. And Jessica? Jessica lost everything. After Bernard's disappearance, her accounts were drained. The child she had carried died in surgery from stress-related complications. Complications that also left her barren. The media turned on her. The baby, once her last card, was gone. Her story became caution, not aspiration. Her father refused to answer her calls. Her mother, silenced by disgrace, was relocated to an assisted living center upstate, funded quietly by Ayana but never acknowledged. Jessica took a job under an alias, sweeping floors at event centers. At one such gala, 6 months after Ayana's second wedding, Jessica stood outside in a janitor uniform, sweeping cigarette butts off the steps of the Valencia Grand Ballroom. Inside, under golden light, Jose and Ayana stood at the center of a champagne tower, their son in her arms, a boy just 3 months old, sleeping soundly as the city's most powerful toasted around them. A massive video screen outside the venue displayed the live feed. Jessica looked up. On screen, Ayana glowing in a silver gown, her arms around Jose's waist, his hand protectively on her shoulder. The baby yawned. Jose kissed Ayana's temple. Jessica's eyes welled. Not with tears. With poison. Regret. Bitterness. Envy. And something worse, recognition. Recognition that everything she had mocked, everything she discarded, now stood untouchable. Behind the ballroom glass, Jose turned to Ayana. "Darling," he whispered into her ear, "it's getting cold." She smiled up at him. "Let's go inside." And together, they walked back into the warmth and light. While the woman who betrayed them, once golden, now forgotten, was left outside in the shadow of everything she had thrown away. The empire stood. The heart healed. And justice was not just poetic. It was complete.